It is 3 minutes after 8 o'clock here at WCDT, and we've got individuals from the Democrat Party with us today. Common Sense Matters. And Philip, I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I'm Philip Lorenz. I'm standing in for Helen Stapleton, and I'm here to interview Bruce Manuel, who's running for the Tennessee House of Representatives, District 39, which includes all of the citizens of Franklin and Marion County. And I'll start out with Bruce. First of all, let's talk about what motivated you to run for this position.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Phil, for having me this morning. It's an honor to talk to you. I actually well, let me do a little background about myself.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to really get at your background.
Okay, I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I went to school down there. I grew up in the inner city, and I came to Franklin County in 1976 as a freshman to attend the University of the South, Sewanee, and it was the first time I'd ever been to Tennessee, and I came to Sewanee on an academic scholarship, and I graduated in 1980. After 1980, after I graduated, after a couple of years, I joined the United States Navy, and as an officer, and I served the United States Navy for 20 years, and after that, I retired as lieutenant commander, and then I worked for the Department of Defense for about 10 years as a information technology specialist. And so that's why joining after retirement, I decided I just loved the Cumberland Plateau. Just the beauty of the area just brought me back. After I'd come back for an alumni reunion, so I decided to buy a house and settle here and retire in Franklin County.
And ironically, I met Bruce in New Orleans in my last tour of duty, and and that was I had no idea that he had a Sewanee connection until later, and now here we are again.
Yes.
Well, Bruce. Okay, now let's go to your motivation for running for office at this time. What are the key principles that you're focusing on?
Well, the main thing that sort of motivated me, I was kind of a reluctant candidate, but what motivated me to agree to run for this position was just looking at the current state of our political system. There's so much rancor and animosity in Congress, and our government is functionally is dysfunctional and is not operating at all. And when I was in the military, and you know this as a fellow veteran, that when an organization is focused on a common goal, something that which benefits them as a whole,
right,
the common good, then you can be successful.
Yes.
And even in the Bible, there's a passage that says, a house divided against itself cannot stand, and that's what we are as a country, a house divided. And so that really concerned me a lot. And so I decided to do my part. A few years ago, I was very active in the Mariah Phillips campaign, which she ran against Desjardins,
yes,
for its congressional seat. And so I got a chance to really get exposed to politics and our campaigning and connecting with voters, and things like that. And so I have a little bit of experience, but this is my first time as a candidate. And some of the things that really concern me, particularly in being a resident of Franklin County, the state of Tennessee, and actually many of the same concerns that I have were confirmed by Franklin County voters, and Marion County voters. And what we did, the Franklin County Democratic Party, was in the fall we put together a survey with questions to determine what issues Franklin County voters thought to be most important to them.
Right.
And so those issues were some of the same issues that resonated with me. And one of the things that really resonated with me, and it's part of my campaign, is expanding Medicaid. One of the things that's really became apparent during the pandemic is that our medical care system is woefully inadequate.
Yes.
And particularly for poor people and people in rural areas, you know.
Disabled.
Disabled, you know, many people
Oh, yeah.
are left behind.
Right.
And this is something that concerns people across the board.
Correct.
And so, you know, right now the governor has refused, you know, to expand Medicaid in the state. And, you know, so many people are left out in the cold.
Well, it's also turned into a block grant,
Absolutely. And
which is
exactly. And so, and that money gets used for other things.
exactly.
You know, which is not the way it's supposed to happen.
No.
And so that's one of the things that really concerns me. And also we see a lot of hospitals in rural areas are being closed.
Yes.
And so, you know, people, and you see charity organizations having to fill in the void, you know, like there's a mobile medical van that goes around like Franklin County, Grundy County,
Yep.
to give free medical care for people because people, number one, don't have access, and number two, they can't afford it.
Right.
And medical care, in my opinion, should be a right.
And one thing I've noticed is a lot of doctors are retiring, and they're not being replaced by doctors.
Right.
I see a
Right.
lot of that.
Yes, because it's very difficult, you know. The system is broken. That system
Oh,
needs
yeah.
to be revived. And, you know, and many people argue against, you know,
Right.
a system like similar to what Bernie Sanders talks about, which,
Right.
you know, sort of universal medical care. But and they say, oh, it can't work. But we already have socialized type medicine in the VA.
Exactly. I mean, as a 20-year Navy veteran myself, I've got TRICARE for life. That is like a national medical system.
Absolutely, and it is an efficient system. It serves a lot of people,
Yes.
and it does it well. You
Very
know,
well.
and so that argument, so the evidence shows that it can be done.
Yes.
If the political will is there.
Yes.
You know, and another thing that really concerns me is education. You know, Franklin County is really struggling to, number one, retain teachers, and one of the big problems is, you know, is teacher pay is very low.
Oh, I know.
You know, teacher pay is very low, particularly in our public school system. And so, and we see now as a move, you know, amongst the governor, and this legislature, which is very much supermajority Republican, to pull money from public money to pay for vouchers for private schools.
Exactly.
You know, and so many people, you know, in poor neighborhoods or poor rural people, you know, who are in you know districts that don't have a lot of money.
Right.
Who are already
Struggling.
underfinanced, yes. Now they want to pull more funding from those to give it to other people who probably can afford to pay for their kids'
Right.
private schools.
It's just totally backwards.
It is backwards, you know, and so the whole system, so much of the things in this country have this, are sort of seem to be predicated on this idea of winner take all, you know, and unfortunately, you know, our former president really promoted and sort of normalized that idea, and so you one of the things that is sort of fostered is this attitude in our political system that not only is it winner take all, but it's win by any means necessary.
Right.
That means cheating. That means, you know, that's why you see it's so much rancor and so much animosity
Right.
in the whole process, which shouldn't be. You know, when people can campaign, you know, and just, you know, launch any kind of lies and misrepresentations against their opponents, you know, just to win without any consequence, something is seriously wrong.
And one of the things about medical, you know, expanding Medicare or Medicaid, and you know, having that kind of a system is, in the long run, even in the short run, people benefit not just medically but financially. I mean, and more people can return to work, get good jobs. I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's shown that the pandemic
Okay.
laid that bare. You know, if you have a population that is healthy, that can, when they have, you know, medical issues that need to be taken care of,
Right.
then it really benefits the entire economy, you know. And so much of our U.S. economy, it's a consumer-based economy, you know. So, you know, for retail, you know, and restaurants, you know, most of those people are people who don't make a lot of money.
Right.
And many of those people do not have paid paid leave for paid sick leave. You
Or
know,
401ks or anything.
exactly, particularly for like restaurant workers.
Oh, yeah.
And so, when you think about the logic of that, it's really, really sad, because you figure here are people who have to deal with the public on a daily basis. You know, they're servers, they're waiters, they're waitresses, and yet if they get sick, they cannot afford to take a day off because they will not be covered. You
No.
see. And so, therefore, those people will often work when they're sick, you know. And so they work when they're sick,
Right.
and then what happens? The disease gets spread. It's simple, you know.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, so that's, you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand, you know, that if you take care of everybody, the least of us, then you take care of all of us, you know.
Yes. Now, infrastructure.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you a little story. Years ago, I used to work for the federal government as a IT specialist for Department of Defense, and we did it was a leadership training, and we did some study on statistics, and so
Right.
I had the opportunity to look at the Congressional Budget Office.
Right.
And the Congressional Budget Office, one of the things that they do is they look at the revenues that come into the federal government, what are the sources of those revenues, and based on how much money they get, they look at the policies that the administration and the legislature are putting forth, and then based on these policies, they can determine or project whether there's going to be a deficit or whether we'll break even or whatever, you know.
Right.
Or have a surplus.
Correct.
And so that's their job. So anyway, I looked at the Congressional Budget Office. I looked at the revenues. I'm going to get back directly to your question. The revenues, and it shows where these revenues come from. What are the tax sources? And like up to 92% of those tax sources of revenues come from payroll taxes, meaning us, average people.
Exactly.
About 7% comes from corporate taxes.
Yep.
That's shocking. That's astounding. You know, when you consider the amount, when you compare that to the amount of revenues that's being made,
Right.
you know, in this country, I guarantee you, by what's being made by us, you know, regular Joes, compared to what's being made by corporations, there's no comparison.
It's not logical.
No, it isn't. And so, in my opinion, for example, our infrastructure is crumbling,
Right.
you know, our roads, our bridges, our trains, our ports, airports, all these things need to be, you know, upgraded and need to
Hospitals.
be hospitals, absolutely. You know, bridges are falling apart.
Right.
And if we, in my opinion, if we taxed, you know, wealthy people, and corporations, particularly the financial sector, we would have the funds we need to do a lot of things that are needed in this country.
Right.
You know, but these corporations have so many tax breaks, and you know, we hear about people like Jeff Bezos who paid no taxes. You know, I mean, that's astounding.
Right.
I mean, it's almost, this tax system is so perverted that it's criminal.
Well, and also a lot of these people have they have their money, their accounts in other countries.
Offshore, yes.
Offshore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tax loopholes, they can offshore their money. And, you know, years ago when the Supreme Court ruled that corporations were people, it was such a perversion of that whole thing, because what happens is that means corporations can claim the same rights that we have as individuals, but they have far more advantages than we do as individuals.
And just think about those employees for those companies that have to deal with that.
Yes. It's just twisted, and the sad thing about it is the political will. I think that the Democratic Congress they're trying. They put forth President Biden's Build Back Better
Right.
plan. You know, it should have been fully funded. You know,
Absolutely.
And when you look at other countries, you know, the United States is so far behind. We do not have a high-speed rail system. You know, you see China, Spain, you know,
I
countries
know.
like that, Europe, you know, all over Europe.
They're ahead of us.
They're light years ahead of us.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because, you know, and so much of the money, you know, many corporations look at the federal government as a cash cow. You know,
Right.
and most of a lot of your companies, your large companies, or that are defense contractors, you know, they're always flashing these, you know, fancy new things to the Pentagon, saying, "Oh, we can do this for you, we can do that for you." And what happens is, oftentimes, they will propose some fancy new weapon, and oftentimes the military will develop a mission based on this fancy new thing that they proposed, you know, and it doesn't always work out, you know.
No.
A case in point, the AV-8 Harrier, jump jet, which we got from the British. I was on my first Navy ship. Was my first Navy ship which was a what's called LHA,
Right.
a Marine Corps carrier. We had aviation, and it had a flight deck and everything. It was one of the first aviation platforms to test the Harrier jets. And I can remember they had to do all this work to reinforce the flight deck, and you could hear them. They were testing and everything, and they, I don't know, went through probably maybe 20 years, of testing and trying to make this thing work, and they finally determined that this thing is just too unstable and too dangerous.
What a waste.
Yeah, after a number of pilots died,
Right.
But we see our military budget just ballooning and ballooning. At the same time, when different services that will help regular people, the argument's always, well, we can't pay for that, we can't afford that. Oh yeah, we can if we want to. That's the real problem.
Yeah, the priorities are backwards.
Absolutely. And the people of the United States are suffering.
Well, I think that one of the things that's important, of course, is to reach out. Tell me about your effort to reach out to the communities here.
I've had a couple of actual campaign events. We had a friend held a campaign fundraiser at the house in Suwanee.
Right.
Recently, there was a gathering up in Suwanee of the very local African American community, and so I attended that gathering and spoke to and introduced myself, because not being originally from Franklin County, it's really important for me to get out and meet people, so they get to know who I am, get to know what I stand for, and get to know my background and what issues I plan to champion if I'm elected.
Right.
And so just this weekend there was a big gathering at Old Conroe Park for the Juneteenth, and I was there. Franklin County Democratic Party were there, and so one of the things that I was focused on, I made sure I did, was I spoke to just about every person who would talk to me at the gathering.
Exactly.
And introduced myself and talked about my campaign, talked about the fact that I'm running as Democrat, I'm running against the incumbent Iris Rutter, and encouraged people, first finding out if people were registered to vote. If they were not, encouraging them to register. We had voter registration cards there for people, and also encouraged particularly young people to register to vote online. I believe it's votetn.org. I think that's the website. So it's the outreach that I think it's a grassroots campaign is what we have.
Absolutely.
We don't have a lot of money.
No.
We don't have a lot of heavy hitters in terms of money backing. So it's a grassroots campaign. Trying to make connections one person at a time.
Right.
And it's interesting. Many people that I spoke to were very, very, very happy to know that someone is running to give them a choice.
Right.
Because they've been so disheartened and
isolated,
and they feel disenfranchised from the whole process. They feel like their votes don't count.
Right.
So having a choice, many people were very, very happy and excited about that, and energized about voting and about the process and about the prospect of things getting better, which is the point.
Right. And I think one of the things one opportunity we have here now is you can tell people how they can reach you in whatever way, and that might be a good.
Yes, there was a couple of ways. Number one, on ActBlue, actblue.org. Number one, you can find out about my campaign. You can also, if people are interested in donating the campaign, they can do it through that website.
Right.
Also, I have a Facebook page that's in the process of development, but we're online. It's Bruce Manuel for TN House, Tennessee House, and and so those are the things that we're doing to reach people, and to reach people through social media, but also face to face.
Right. And you also talked about one of the other things you talked about is justice and equity for all.
Yes. So that's one of the other things that really, really concern me about when I talk it goes back to what I talk about, this winner-take-all mentality
Right.
that has permeated much of the Republican policies, which has become sort of just overtaken by Donald Trump, And so across the country, we've seen the slew of voter suppression laws that have been put in place by state legislatures, designed to limit the people who can vote,
Right.
and really designed to disenfranchise people that they don't think will vote Republican.
Right.
And that's just not fair, because the voters we have a right to vote, and it's not right for them to try to limit that.
And it probably disenfranchises some of the very people that would support them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And things like limiting the number of voting places that people can go to.
Right.
Like you've seen in Georgia, limiting the amount of time that people can vote. For example, making it illegal. I know there was lobbies in Georgia where a lot of, like, churches would, after church they would, put people in who want to go vote, like older people, and they would take them to the voting places where they can go vote.
Right.
So limiting that so people can do it. I mean, and just rules that were just abjectly cruel. Like, for example, making it illegal to even offer people water, while they're standing in line, to vote. In lines that are long, because they've limited the number of places that people can go vote. And so it's like just this mentality that is very much just geared toward winning at the expense of people.
That's what I'd call undemocratic.
Very undemocratic. Very undemocratic. It's actually hostile to the democratic process.
Right.
So yeah, it's concerning to me, and I think it should concern everybody. Republican. And there's a lot of Republicans I know who are moderate. In terms of their political views, who feel like they have no place in the Republican Party.
Right.
Because it's really been taken over by a smaller and smaller fringe
Right.
of people, of very loud, very vocal, very combative people, who like to stir up controversy,
Right.
To gain, to get that 50 minutes of fame. I don't need to call any names, but
Right.
you know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
And those people are becoming the stars, and those people, they're never brought in line by the Republican Party leadership.
Right.
They're allowed to do those kind of things, and it's like,
Are encouraged.
they're encouraged on the table, but they're never condemned.
No.
You know.
Well, being a photojournalist, that's my bulk of my career. I've literally met all of these people, both sides, and it's amazing how you can find common ground with people that you would never dream.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, when it comes down to the actual vote,
Mm-hmm.
then we have an issue.
Yes. Yeah. It's and I in my campaign, I focus on issues that really affect everybody.
Yes.
We as citizens, there's a concept called the common good that's rarely talked about.
I know.
And there's people like the Poor People's Campaign that's going on in North Carolina, where they're talking about the widespread poverty that's affecting people. Our middle class, shrinking, and many people are there, and the number of people who are working poor is growing. Because it's just unaffordable to live in the cities.
Right.
And and that's one thing. That's one thing.
They can't afford a home.
Can't afford a home. Years ago, I remember when I was working for a government, I noticed, it was probably around 2012 or something like that. I read an article in the it was a Wall Street Journal, and they were talking about how these very wealthy hedge funds
Right.
in Wall Street. This was when there were rampant foreclosures. In a lot of areas. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Atlanta, Houston, all over, and these huge hedge funds with a lot of money were going around and spending like billions of dollars buying up these middle class, moderately priced homes because people were being foreclosed on. And so immediately when I saw that, I said, you know what they're going to do? They're going to take those homes. They're going to take those homes, turn them into rental properties, which they did.
Right.
You know, and they're going to create a housing shortage.
Yep.
They're going to contribute to the housing shortage, because this is at the same time, you know, during the recession, you know, the construction started slowing down because there weren't as many construction jobs. They weren't building as many homes.
Right.
So you have these two parallel things happening. You know, many homes that people can afford are taken off the retail market and put on the rental market.
Right.
You see, and so over time, you see those same you know, landlords that are being managed from Wall Street. You know, these properties. I'm talking about huge swaths of properties. You know, over time they keep raising the rent. You know, and you hear that a lot now.
Oh, Nashville.
Right, and how the rents are being raised, you see, and so they're basically exploiting people who, you know, maybe lost their home, lost their job, you know, so they lost their home, you know, through foreclosure, and so their credit is no good, so they can't get a mortgage, so they have to rent, and so it's just this predatory mentality that pervades so much of what is happening within our economy.
Yes.
And so these are kind of things that that Bernie Sanders speaks to. For some reason, many people don't hear that. People don't understand. You know, what are the things? But when you sort of break it down to what is really going on, you really see, you know, that there are many things that are happening that are affecting people on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
You know, people can't feed their families. They, you know, because they have to pay the rent so much. There are many people who pay up to 50% of their income on just paying rent. So they have to choose between, you know, buying food, you know, and paying their rent, you know, buying gas and paying their rent.
Medical.
Many people just forego medical treatments for, you know, serious issues, or buy medication.
Right.
Because you can't afford it.
Exactly.
And that's just not right.
No.
So yeah, so those are the kind of things that concern me personally and motivated me to run.
Absolutely. And of course, the whole world is kind of facing this really, you know, it's not just here. I mean, it's a worldwide issue.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the countries, we should be the one that's representing a way forward.
Mm-hmm. I know the United States has lost so much credibility in the world. In the last administration, really, it'll take us decades to regain a lot of the stature we once had. You know, we you know, in terms of moral authority, you know, we pulled out of the Paris Accords, you know.
And the Iran deal.
Yes, the Iran deal, which was something that was, and we basically sort of slapped the face of our European partners, you know.
Right.
And the Iranians were, you know, they were doing what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, they were following the agreement. You know, there was no reason to pull out of that.
No.
None at all. You know.
No.
And so there was so many of the decisions that were made were so short-sighted, but they have long-lasting implications. You know, those things matter.
Yes.
Words matter. Actions matter.
Absolutely.
I'm curious of a few things you're talking about. One, education,
Mm-hmm.
and I agree completely, and I've said it multiple times on the radio. It's criminal what we pay educators in this community.
Yes.
You know, Franklin County it's a shame what we're actually giving these teachers to go out there, and they're the ones who are molding, you know, the future of what we have.
Absolutely.
But what are some of the things you plan to do if you do get elected to help fix that?
Well, one of the things that I think that is, I think that will more positively affect what's going on at a state level. One of the things that has just recently happened is that there was a requirement that the state legislature put in place that people running for school board positions had to declare a political party, Republican, Democrat, or independent. And to me, that strikes me as a way of gaming the system, because they know that many voters in Tennessee are Republican. So if people run for a position like that, which in the past was a non-political position, a non-partisan position, and I think that needs to change, for one thing, because I think that when you have school boards, because school boards determine a lot of those things, you know, how the budget is spent, how teachers are paid. Of course, they get the, you know, funding from the state.
The curriculum.
Yes, and the curriculum, of course. And so when you get just a very narrow view of, number one, what teachers should be paid, what the curriculum should be, and all those things, then I think that's a bad way of doing business. And so I think, number one, school boards should be nonpartisan.
Oh,
I think it should be determined by the quality of the person running. They shouldn't have to, align themselves with a political party, a political movement. And I think that more funding, more state funding should go to school districts, particularly in rural areas, to pay teachers. Number one, to encourage teachers quality teachers to, number one, move to areas like, Franklin County, Marion County, and then to stay, so they can afford to do so. I've heard that many teachers, I know there's a shortage of teachers here in Franklin County, and they often will move to a county in Tennessee where they can make better pay, and have a better quality of life.
Well, you don't have to move counties. You can stay in your job here and go work in Coffee County and make almost $6,000 more a year.
That's true.
Exactly.
Okay, that's true. Absolutely. Yes.
So, I mean, that's one of the biggest issues. To find a way to get that pay. I guess where it's more on an even playing field. The other problem
Yes.
we're having is finding, like you said, there's a teacher shortage.
Yes.
And people aren't going into the education field anymore. And how do we fix that?
That's a complicated.
Well, I think the pay for one,
Yes.
pay and support, and I think one of the things that I know that I've heard that a lot of teachers are frustrated with is school boards imposing restrictions on how they should teach and what they should teach, and really limiting their ability to really educate children, because education should be about learning about the world as it is,
The reality.
The reality, absolutely. And we find a lot of people who want to impose their very narrow views on what should be taught in the classroom. And I think that a lot of people, and a lot of people I spoke to, are very frustrated about that, because they don't know what they can teach about. If they can teach about LGBTQ issues, where they can talk about this, where they can talk
Slavery.
about that, slavery. That has become a hot button issue.
Oh, yeah.
The whole idea of teaching
American history.
American history as it actually happened.
Right.
Rather than I use the term, but whitewashing it, milk toasting it down, to palatable things. I think, and children are not, and it's sort of it's an insult to, I think, the intelligence of our children.
Yes.
Because our children
Absolutely.
are curious, they're intelligent, and they are like they're
open.
They're open to learning, and children are resilient. And if you give them the tools they need to, number one, understand what is happening in the world, they're perfectly qualified to make their own choices.
Right, and to have critical thinking and really, question things.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. Is rather than trying to sort of have them lockstep into a particular way of thinking, we should be working on and helping to develop critical thinking skills. Rather than just being, drones. Who will just follow orders, without questioning. Because if you, one of the things that happens when you teach someone to develop their critical thinking, then they tend to question things.
And that's what they should do.
Absolutely, because it's the only way we improve.
Yes.
That's the only way we can evaluate where we are.
Exactly.
Is by questioning things and not just accepting things as they are.
No, that's learning. That's real learning.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that. Those are a couple of major issues I think teachers face, the pay, and then and dealing with the control that's imposed on them, and so I think that there's so many issues, just so many. It's a big. A teacher asked me about that over the weekend at the Juneteenth celebration, and so I'm not an expert, but I've spoken to people who have kids. My kids are grown, but people whose kids are still in school, and so I see some of the same issues coming up again and again, that people talk about, or people who went to school here in Tennessee, and the people complain, I don't feel like I really got a good education. I don't feel like I was really prepared for college, you know, and that's a shame, you know. And I think that our public schools should be doing it because our public schools educate the bulk of our citizenry,
Right.
you know. And it's a public school which should serve a purpose of developing our citizens, you know.
So they can advance in life.
Absolutely, and then the country advances, you know.
Exactly.
Exactly. So there's this really great. It's a funny movie. It's called Idiocracy. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You know what I'm talking about.
I've seen it.
Yeah, it's a really great movie. It's a comedy, but it's about a guy who he's an army guy. It's like in the 70s. And it's a part of this experiment where they put him to sleep. And so there's a big accident. He winds up, it's like Rip Van Winkle. So he winds up waking up about 50 years into the future. And at this point, the IQ of, and during this time, the narrator of the movie is talking about how intelligent people start having fewer kids, and people who are less intelligent are having more and more kids. And so the whole system just sort of collapses, you know. And so it's a very funny movie, but it's kind of an extreme illustration of just this whole idea. You know, if you don't, you know, invest in teaching children and invest in our education, that your country cannot. It's not sustainable.
Everybody pays for that loss.
Funny
Absolutely.
you brought that up because I told somebody the other day that's a prophecy.
Oh yeah,
That movie's a prophecy. It is not a.
I know.
I mean, it's pretty much what we're looking at.
Exactly.
Yeah,
in the future
absolutely.
if we don't change the way we're doing things.
Absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah, yeah. You know,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, in fact, there's some of the shows, like I think Jay Leno used to do it, and other shows they would go out, you know, and they with a camera with a microphone and ask people just civic questions like, how many people are on the Supreme Court, and people are like, in it 6, in it 5, they go keep going, 8, one more, 9, okay, 9, you know. So people, it's like, and people just very, very simple things that people just, it's astonishing. It's astonishing. That's just one that I remember.
Yeah.
But some of the things that people didn't know was just, and these were people that looked like they're, you know, middle class working people, but they just somehow we're not doing our job of
Right.
educating our children.
I mean, I was raised to question everything, even things I might agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just really look at things closely
Mm-hmm.
from every angle.
Mm-hmm. And just because you question things doesn't mean that you can't be a team player. It doesn't
Exactly.
mean that you can't contribute to an organization
Right.
and make it better. You know, in fact,
Just the opposite.
absolutely. In fact, that's a principle of management. You know, that if you want to have a team that's like a high performance team, members should always be able to speak openly about how they perceive the way things are, because the leader can never see everything. You know, and if the leader is the type of leader that imposes their views, then what happens is those people who pretend, you know, to stay in lockstep with those views are the ones that get rewarded, and those that differ, you know, and challenge get discarded, ostracized, you know,
Yeah.
beat down, and so then that's when you wind up having. That's what leads to authoritarianism.
Exactly. Polarized
Absolutely.
environment.
Exactly. It leads to authoritarianism.
Yep.
And so years ago, I remember I worked with a woman whose father had been a Russian linguist in Germany during the 70s. And so she grew up in Germany, her whole family was there. And so he would often go on missions where he would listen into Russian communications. And he told her, he said, he predicted that in the future, you would see Russia becoming more like the United States, the United States becoming more like Russia. And so that's just really something to think about, you know, in terms of like the economic systems, in terms of what we see this push, you know, to be more authoritarian and less tolerant of people and views and, you know, and ways of life,
Right.
you know. And so you see that happening in this country. And that's very, very dangerous, you know.
It's frightening.
It is, you know. We as Americans, we would look at all these countries, you know, and, you know, Latin America, Africa, you know, and in Asia, you know, and look at it and say, oh man, how could they, you know, go that way? How could they elect someone like that? How could they? But it happened in the United States. Democracy is very, very fragile. It's fragile. It's an idea. And if people don't believe in that idea, it cannot work.
No.
And so when you have people who it appears that their whole focus is to basically remove the good things of democracy, of inclusion, of treating people equitably, of considering, all the voices, then that leads down a very, very dangerous road.
Right.
And
But
that's
have we ever truly had that here?
in the United States.
Yeah.
I think we've struggled. I think there have been periods. I think when we were a little closer to it.
Yes.
I should say that we were moving it, but it seemed like throughout history, and Howard Zinn usually he documented a lot of this in his book, People's History of the United States. That usually the United States starts to move toward a more equitable, more democratic ideas. There's always this backlash.
Yeah.
There's always this move to say, we're moving too far. This is moving toward communism. You see this fear mongering comes up. And so we wind up, we never seem to reach it. It seems like we make
progress.
Yeah, we make one step forward and then two steps back. And so.
And the reality is, communism, fascism, any kind of dictatorship is bad.
Absolutely.
I don't care which side it is.
Absolutely.
Well, as I said, there's a big difference in democracy and communism.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's the one, like you said, we are leaning a little more towards communism than people start to pull back, and then rightfully so, they should.
Yeah.
In that situation, but true democracy, I can only think of a few civilizations that have ever really actually had it.
Yeah, and also, there is his name is Chris Hedges. He's a noted speaker, a critic. He was a journalist. He talks about empires. And he wrote a book called America: The Fair World Tour. He talks about all the things that he's seen in the United States, and his book is like around 2007, 2008, and he starts looking at how our financial system, our tax system, how so many things are geared toward very wealthy people, and so many of our middle class regular people are falling behind. And how
I think about the trickle down
fantasy.
Yes.
It's
ridiculous.
Yeah, it is ridiculous.
Well, we weren't designed to be a republic either. It was designed, or not to democracy. It was designed as a republic.
Sure.
And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is the United States wasn't designed as a democracy. It was designed as a different type of government.
Yeah, and I've also heard it called a representative democracy. But when you look at things like the Senate, the way the Senate was developed, the Senate was developed, in order to. So the southern states could have have as much a say as northern states, and it wasn't determined by population.
Well, I've always heard our country is defined as a democratic republic.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be kind of confusing, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's. I think that's why I think these kind of discussions are so important.
Yes.
I agree completely. I think it's very important to be able to get out there and to get ahead of a lot of these issues that are coming. We're going to be facing.
Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier, the polarization this country has seen in the last, I'd say, almost 8 years now.
It's dangerous.
It's gotten terrifying.
Absolutely.
I'd probably go longer than that, about 12 years that we've seen the separation, that we've started to see the rift, and we've got to find a way to get back to a happy medium.
Absolutely. One of the things that I see that has really contributed to that is money in politics. John McCain, I didn't agree with some things that John McCain, his beliefs, but he had integrity, and those one of the things he worked on was campaign finance reform.
Yes.
And we've got to get that money out of politics because the lobbying, the influence has just ruined our politics, and I think about the British system, or it's a parliamentary system. It's different, but the way they do their elections, they have opposing how many candidates you have. They have 6 weeks. Well, first of all, it's state funded, and every campaign gets an equal amount of funding, and that's all you get, and that's all you can use. As far as I can say, I may be wrong, but I think that's all you get.
Yes.
It's mainly state funded, and you have 6 weeks to present your position to the people. 6 weeks, So it's not like our system where you have months of just all these outlandish, over the top campaigns that people are doing to sort of demonize their opponent to win. It's like 6 weeks. So if you cannot explain to the voting public what you have to offer them, why you should be voted into office, then it doesn't take 2 years, and so. Many people in politics, who are elected officials, as soon as they get elected, immediately start fundraising,
Right.
For the next, campaign, and that's where they spend a lot of their time.
Right.
And that's both parties,
Mm-hmm.
and so, I think it's really kind of a shame that we only have 2 parties to choose from. We don't have any other choices, and I think that, and sadly, both parties cater to the same big money
Yes.
to fund their, a lot of, and that, probably will get me in trouble with some people, but that's the truth. It's just simply the truth, and so we have to get money out of politics.
Yes,
I agree completely.
Yes.
absolutely.
Well, anything else you gentlemen have for today?
No, I think I've talked myself hoarse.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you putting the word out, and we'll see where things go from here. And if you want any more information you want as far as how to contact you?
Let's see, I've got an email address. It's BruceManuel 2022@gmail.com. If any the voters have a concern or that they'd like to us to address the campaign, you can send us an email at that address. And so I look forward to hearing from you.
Yep. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank y'all for coming on this morning.